Welcome to Passion Church. For more information about Passion Church, please visit us online at www.passionchurch.tv. Now let's join the service already in progress.
In terms of minutes, hours, days, weeks, and years. We believe that by doing that it will help us handle life. And so we break it down into chunks of time. Time drives everything, by the way. Have you figured that out? We want to start on time. We want to end on time. I can tell you I want to end on time because sometimes I can tell. So I'm just cluing you in. I can tell sometimes. We want everything. We want to arrive. My mama taught me that if you're not 20 minutes early, you're late. Everything is driven by time. We want everything handled in time. Be on time. Manage time. How many of you have a calendar app on your phone that governs your entire life? Like if you lose your phone, your life is over. You don't even know when to get up in the morning. You don't know when you're supposed to go to bed. You don't know when you're supposed to feed the children. I mean, you literally don't know what to do without. Okay, just me. All right. So our efforts are to break down time into manageable segments, so that we think it will enable us to handle life more effectively because we take it in small chunks. There's a problem with that, though, and that is this. When we handle time in small chunks, we often fail to get perspective. Because life is broken down into what I'm going to do today and today only. I've got my task list on my phone, and if I can just get through today, I'll worry about tomorrow later. We manage it like that, and because we do, we fail to have any long-term perspective. Does anybody in the room know anybody that has trouble and struggles with long-term perspective? That's why they'll go to the store and buy $9,000 of stuff on their credit card and then worried about paying it like 6 months later. Anybody know anybody like that? Okay, I was just wondering. So with that thought in mind, what I want to do is ask you this question. It's already been asked. What if you only had 1 month to live? 30 days. What if you knew that you only had 30 days left? I wonder if we had that kind of knowledge, if it would change our perspective, if it would perhaps change our attitudes, if it might change our approach, and would it possibly change and adjust our priorities if we knew we only had 30 days to live? Today we're going to try to gain some perspective. Over the next few weeks we're going to talk about time. Talk about wasted time, talk about passing time, talk about those kind of issues. But in Scripture, there are some of our heroes that when I mention their names today, you know who they are. You're familiar with their stories. So there are heroes. And the truth is that even the heroes in Scripture struggled and wrestled with the concept of time. But because they dealt with the issue of time, it presents to us lessons that if we could ever grasp the understanding that they present to us, it would help us handle the time that we have. I want you to join me in Psalms chapter 39, verse 4 and 5. It's a powerful portion of Scripture. Listen to what David says. He says, "Show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is. You have made my days a mere handbreadth. The span of my years is as nothing before you." Listen to this statement. "Everyone is but a breath, even those who seem secure." Even those who seem secure, their life is still but a breath. Then in Job chapter 14, verse 5, Job weighs in and he makes this statement. He says, "A person's days are determined. You have decreed the number of his months and have set limits." Everybody say limits. "That he cannot exceed." That's a powerful statement there. You have set limits that he cannot exceed. Now, let me stop there and say this. That can either scare the bejesus out of you, or it can make you understand that our Father is intimately acquainted with us and knows us. Right? He knows the number of our days. That can encourage you too. Psalm chapter 90, David comes back in. I'm reading this order on purpose. Psalm chapter 90, he kind of comes back and almost reiterates what Job says. He says this. Listen to this powerful statement that David says. He says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I'm going to read that again. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. There are 3 really important lessons that we can learn out of these accounts that will help us handle time. 30 days. From right now, the stopwatch started, you've got 30 days to live. What would change? The first thing that our authors, our heroes of the faith, David and Job, they teach us this. They teach us that there is an expiration date. All right? David asked God, he said, show me the number of my days. Job says a person's days are determined. And according to Job, he even goes one step further. He says, God, you've already decreed the expiration date of my life. Okay? There is an expiration date. Okay, let me see if I can help you. How many of you try to get extra days with your milk? All right. Okay. It says, like, I bet if we went to some of your refrigerators this morning, I bet there are people that their milk says April, what is today, the 8th? I bet it says March 29th on your milk, and you're just hoping and praying. You don't even smell it. You just do the real quick pour and put back in and just hope and pray. 4 days. You can get 4 days max, Jonathan says. I don't know what the limit is. I just know that on milk, we try to extend the expiration date. And the truth is that if you have a really cold refrigerator, you can get it. So some of you would testify. I could give you the mic, and you got like 4 days. Some of you got 6 days. Some of you we don't even want to talk to because you're gross, and now it's cottage cheese. Okay, but what I've noticed is that we treat life like milk. We honestly believe that we're going to have this ability to get to the expiration date, and then we hope and we pray we want to extend the expiration date. You say, well, what are you talking about, Steve? I'm saying that what we tend to do is we act like that we're going to get some more time to do what's important. We push off all the important stuff to the last, hoping that we will be able to get to expiration date and maybe we'll get a few more moments, a few more days. But I need to tell you this morning that what works for milk does not work for life. Job says that you have decreed the number of my days, and I cannot extend beyond that. There is an expiration date that should cause us to understand that our days are numbered and we are not going to be able to exceed or push past that set time. Therefore, we must deal with what we need to deal with now. If we understood that, if we understood that was a truth, it would change how we live. We say it like this. We say, there are 2 things that are guaranteed in life: death and taxes. Right? Yeah. That is depressing, isn't it? Some of us would rather handle death than taxes, but it's still coming either way. But the Hebrews writer comes in behind all of that with that concept that it is a guaranteed fact, and he makes this statement. He says this in terms of the expiration date. He says it like this. He says, it is appointed for every man to die. That is an appointment we will all keep. This is an encouraging message right after Easter, isn't it? Hey, I'm not trying to, this message is not a downer, I promise. I'm just trying to get us some perspective. Because we need this kind of perspective, because the stopwatch started, and now you don't even have 30 days left. Now you got 29 and whatever. All right? Time expires. Right now, or at least in 2015, the average lifespan in America, check this out, this is going to scare some of you. Some of you think this sounds like a long ways off, and it's not really. The average lifespan in America in 2015 was 78.74 years. There is an expiration date. Did you know that on average in the worldwide, that 151,600 people die every day worldwide? If you break that down by hour, 6,316 people will die worldwide while we're in service today. There is an expiration date. You cannot escape expiration. David says that even those who seem secure will come up against their expiration date. It's inevitable. Do you know anybody that tries to ignore that? Are you in relationship with anybody that they act like that if they don't talk about dying, they won't? I mean, some of y'all got parents that adamantly refuse to fill out a will. They want to get all their stuff in order, and you're going bonkers because you know they can ignore it all they want to. The truth is, they're still going to die. Okay, touch your neighbor, say you're going to die. Tell them, come on. Just to encourage you, the week after Easter, you're going to die. Okay. The reason I bring that up to you is because it brings clarity and perspective. Most of you know my story, not all, but most of you know that for those of you that think that gospel music's going, no, I don't know why I do that all the time. That just rolls through my mind. Anyway, for those of you, some of y'all don't have a clue what it was, but for those of you that don't know my story, and for those of you that think, because there are people that do think that all preachers do is golf, they think all they do is golf, and there's no stress related to this ministry kind of thing. And boy, if I could do this, it would be easy. Just my story is that almost 3 years ago, it's going by so fast, I had a heart attack. Too much stress, too much Papa Angelo's pizza, and he'll sue me now that I put that over the airways. And Joe, I love you, bro. Best pizza in the world. Too much fried food, just too much stress. Can I tell you that there was a moment in all of that because we all feel like we're Superman. When you're 46 years old, you don't feel like today's the day. Right? And when you're 22, you don't feel like today's the day. And for me, my story is there was a real moment of clarity. I was in Springfield, Missouri, which was a bad thing and a good thing. It was a bad thing in that none of y'all could come and bring me stuff. So I'm really still deeply offended that I didn't get any balloons and no flowers, and I'm playing. I didn't care. The good thing about that was that other than my family, I was alone. And there was a moment of clarity that took place for me laying on the table after they put the stent in. They go through the artery down in your leg, and one of the steps they have to do is that after a period of time they have to remove that line. I watched my dad go through that. My dad had a heart attack at 56, and I figured I'd better him, so I did it earlier because I wanted to one-up my dad. But I watched him go through it because they sometimes struggle to get the blood to stop. And I'll never forget it. Very clear moment in my life. They pulled the line, and the bright light started. I got lightheaded. My eyes started rolling. I'm leaving. Julie's standing next to me, holding my hand. And the last thing I remember saying to her before they fixed it, because all they have to do to fix it is tilt your head up and put a wet cloth and increase your IV. Why they don't do that before they pull the line, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they were just playing with me. I don't know. But all I know is when I got better and got up out of there, I slapped the nurse. Just saying, no, I didn't. I'm playing. All they got to do is tilt your head, start your IV at a stronger level, and put a cloth on your head. But your blood pressure drops. And as I'm fading, Julie's holding my hand. Clarity. What really matters? What counts? There is an expiration date. That should bring clarity to us for us to understand that we need to take care of what matters And I just want to tell you that I want you to think about your expiration date, not as a downer, but rather I want you to think about your expiration date this morning so that it will drive you. I don't want you to think about your expiration date so that it will immobilize you. I want you to think about your expiration date so that it will mobilize you to do what matters. I don't want it to cause you to respond in fear. I want your thoughts about your expiration date to increase your faith so that I got to do what God's called me to do now. I don't want it to paralyze you. I want it to prod you to live life. The second thing that I want to say to you this morning out of these accounts is this, is not only is there an expiration date, we need to understand that time is ticking. Where are all my 1992 DC Talk fans at this morning? Because time is ticking away. Ticking away. See, some of y'all don't know. Y'all weren't cool enough to listen to DC Talk. But time is ticking. DC Talk, all they did was they understood what David teaches us, and that is that time moves quickly. The clock ticks. I read it to you out of the NIV. It said it like this. It said, everyone is but a breath. Listen to the same statement out of the Message Bible because I think it brings clarity. It says this, oh, we're all puffs of air. Oh, we're all shadows in a campfire. Oh, we just spit in the wind. We make our pile, and then we leave it. He's talking about the brevity of life, that time ticks. James comes along and he echoes the same. You learned it in one version. I'm going to read it in a different, then I'll remind you how you learned it. In James chapter 4, verse 14, he says this, how do you know what is going to happen tomorrow? For the length of your lives is as uncertain as the morning fog. Now you see it, but then soon it's gone. You know how we learned it? Life is but a vapor. That is, the reality of life is that the clock is ticking away. Time slips. It goes silently, but it goes quickly. Time is never gained. I'm going to save time today. No, you're not. You cannot save time. There's not an individual in this room that can save time. When this minute clicks by, you will never be able to get it back. You do not save time. It expires. It passes. It is lost. Some of you, for you right now, minutes seem like hours. For some of you, hours seem like days. And for some of you, because of what you're going through in life, days seem like weeks, and weeks seem like months, and the last month has seemed like a year. But can I just tell you this morning that even in your worst moments, time is slipping away. It expires. It goes quickly. There are two important lessons out of that I want to land on this morning. I'm just going to, just a few more minutes, and I'll get you out of here, but because time is important, and I don't want to waste your time. The first lesson is this, is if you're not careful, you will miss what is important, and you will miss once-in-a-lifetime opportunities if you don't pay attention to the fact that time is ticking. It's here, then it's gone. If you understand that time moves quickly, then enjoying the moment. Have you ever heard that phrase and you just want to get mad at somebody? Just enjoy the moment. Just enjoy the moment. Doesn't it make you mad when they just enjoy? But that wouldn't be some cute little saying if you understand that time is moving so quickly that if you don't enjoy the moment, enjoy the fact that your little boy is 2 years old, because in a moment you will wake up and he'll be 20 years old. And you'll go, where did that go? And I can still remember Nico and I coached a team. Our boys were 5 and 6 years old, and there were a lot of weekends of baseball and long games where they're playing in the dirt, and you can't keep them from picking the flowers in the outfield because and you go, I wish we didn't have so many games. I'd go back in a heartbeat, Nico, because it goes so quick. But that doesn't just apply to children. That applies to your spouse. That applies to what you're experiencing in life. It applies to every opportunity you have. We must learn to enjoy the moment. The second reason that recognizing the speed of time is so important is that if you understand that time is ticking away, then you also come to an understanding that time is never spent. It's only invested. That's why this message is not a downer. It's a prod to live with some sense of urgency. Time is literally the most valuable commodity that anybody in this room has. Listen, we live life as if the most valuable commodity that we have is our money. We live like the most valuable thing that we have in our possession is our retirement account. We act like the most valuable thing that we have in our life is our house, our car, our clothes, whatever we're attached to. But can I just tell you this morning that the most valuable commodity that any one of us in this room has is time. Why do I say that? Because you need to understand that when you give your time to something, you are literally giving your life to something. When you give your time to someone, you are literally giving your life away 1 minute at a time. Because time is never spent. It is only invested. So then I must ask you the question. What are you giving your life to? There's a trade that happens. There's an exchange that happens. When you give your life to something, an exchange happens. You are trading your time for that thing. There's a second question. Who are you giving your life to? Because every minute that you spend with someone, you're not spending it, you're investing it. There's this exchange that happens. A statement is made about David that kind of ties into this. I think it's the most powerful and probably the greatest compliment paid to anybody in the entirety of Scripture. It's an incredible compliment. The writer says this: David served his generation well. What that says to me is that David understood the value of time, and he invested it in the people around him and in the generation that he could impact. He never wasted the time. He didn't spend his time. He invested his time to the point that they said he served his generation well. I think that then it's no coincidence that in Psalm chapter 90, he says this, and I read it to you because he connects a correct view of time to wisdom. If you don't hear anything else I say this morning, listen to what David said. He said, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Did you catch it? He says there is wisdom to be gained when you understand that your life has an expiration date. So we can come to a logical conclusion then that if we live unwisely, it means we don't understand time. David says, if you would teach us to number our days, we will begin to live with wisdom because we will value and understand time. I can serve my generation. Listen, you can serve your generation well if you understand that you're not spending time, you are investing time. Because then you will invest it in the right things. That's why I'm going to try to help you be reminded. Ushers, would you help me this morning? We are going to pass some buckets. In these buckets, I don't want you to cheat. Don't look in the bucket. We don't want you to cheat. I want you to just grab the bucket, and you know how we used to do the raffle drawings where you reach in and take in the bucket are these little white squares with numbers on them. I cheated. I looked at mine because I like number 23. I won't tell you why, but you can probably figure it out. All right, so I picked number 23. Just grab one, pass it on down real quickly. Come on, quickly, pass them quickly. Time's ticking. Time is ticking away. Ticking away. Ticking. You want to do a special? Okay, I thought we were going to get, I get to be Toby Mac. You get to be Michael Tate. Not typecasting or anything, but not a bit, no. So, all right, you got your little square. Come on, come on, come on. Everybody got your square. Time's ticking. Time's ticking. Time's ticking. If you got your number, just all right, look at it. Look at it. Look at your number. Once you get it, look at it. This is not your lottery number. This is not bingo. This is not the order you get to eat in. All right, I'm going to wait till everybody gets one. All right, everybody getting close, getting close. We just invested 2 minutes. My OCD's kicking in, they said. It is. I got time passing. All right, you got your number? Look at it, look at it, look at it. I just want to yell bingo really loud. Bingo! All right, so, okay, so this is the number. Hold your number up. Let me see what you got. I want to see. All right. Who lucked out and got 120? Anybody get 120? No, okay, you can put them down. Okay, what if this was the number of days you have left? Some of you want to change numbers, don't you? Some of y'all trading numbers. Some of you are turning them over. What if this was how many days you had left? Would that known number cause you to live differently? Let me ask you, I'm going to get really, listen to me, stay with me. If you knew that you only had the number of days left listed on your number, on your little square, would it cause you to repair broken relationships? What if the number on your square was how many days you had left? Would it cause you to spend or invest more time in the people in your life that really matter? Would it cause you to leave work at work? Would it cause you to turn the TV off long enough to have a meaningful conversation with somebody that needs your ear? Would it cause you to treat people differently? This is what I'm asking you to do. This week I'm asking you to do this. I'm asking you to put this number either in your pocket or on your dash. Interesting word there in light of what we're talking about. On the dash of your car. As a daily reminder that the clock is ticking. And that you have an opportunity to invest time. I'm hoping that what is going to take place out of this series as we try to wrestle with the concepts of time, that as we look at these numbers, and my number is 23, that if God was to say your expiration date is in 23 days, I'm praying that what it will do for me is the same thing it will do for you, which is this. It will cause a sense of urgency to overtake us. Because I have one last question. If you knew you had only 23 days, would there be any urgency about sharing what you've encountered and experienced with Jesus with somebody that has not encountered Jesus, whose expiration date may come before yours? Your days are numbered. Time will expire. What are you going to do with the days that you have left? What matters? Father, in Jesus' name, I pray this morning that what could be a very sober, downer type of message would become just the opposite. I pray that what would happen in this moment right here is that as we come to grips with an understanding that time is so incredibly valuable, that we're investing our time. Every moment matters. Every time the clock sweeps one more second, it matters. It matters. This is important. It's the most valuable resource we have. We're never going to get any more of it. And so, Father, I pray that what you would accomplish this morning in the life of each person sitting here and those watching over the internet is that we would value time. We would literally number our days. Hypothetically, the number that is on our square, but in reality, we would really think about the scope of our life, the timetable of our life. We cannot boast about tomorrow because our lives are like a vapor. They're like fog in a campfire. Here today and gone tomorrow. I pray it would bring clarity. I pray that it would bring urgency. I pray that it would cause us to shake off apathy, that you would allow this to drive us to invest our time wisely in what matters. I pray that we would take an inventory every morning when I get up over the next 4 weeks and I look at this number. I pray that it would force me to take care of what matters. Father, there are folks in this room that need to deal with what matters. They have a relationship that is ruptured. They have a relationship that is broken. It could be the most important relationship in their life. Maybe harsh words have been spoken. Maybe feelings have been hurt. Wounds have been inflicted. But in light of the number of days, I have an urgency to make it right. I want to make sure we're right. Father, in light of the number of days, there are folks under the sound of my voice that are literally giving their life 1 minute at a time. They're giving it away for stuff that really doesn't matter. Work that may be important but is not paramount. Time that could be spent on more important things is being given away. God, I pray this morning that you'd bring clarity. I pray that it would cause us to prioritize when we see the number. When we see the number, it would help our heart to gain wisdom. Make a plan. We would map out a plan to invest our time wisely. And last but not least, Father, I pray that this number would remind us that there are people all around us that are expiring. They may not be dead today. They may not pass away tomorrow, but their life is passing by one moment at a time. And I pray that our understanding of the value of it and the importance of time would drive us with a sense of urgency to tell them about what Jesus has done for us. I pray that you would remind us about people in our lives that don't know you. And we would quit playing like we have year after year after year after year after year. And one of these days we'll win them. And one of these days we'll tell them. And one of these days we'll share the story. Instead, Father, I pray that what we would do with a sense of urgency would overtake us. And we would begin to freely and frequently testify of your faithfulness and your goodness. Because that's the most important thing. The most important thing to me, Father, is I want to spend eternity where time is no more, where there is no expiration date, where we go on and on and on with no end because you have no end. I want to spend those moments with those that are most special to me. So, Father, I pray that urgency would overtake us. Teach us to number our days so that our heart will be filled with wisdom. I ask you to do this in Jesus' name. Would you hold your number number up. Even if you don't like it, say, this is my number. Come on, say, this is my number. I want you to reflect on that number over the next 4 weeks so that you prioritize your life. Come on, say it.
It's been a privilege to have you join us for this time of ministry. To find more Passion Church resources or to make a donation online, visit www.passionchurch.tv. Remember, you can't live without passion. Welcome to Passion Church. For more information about Passion Church, please visit us online at www.passionchurch.tv. Now let's join the service already in progress.
All right, how many of you have your little tags? You got your little numbers? What? Okay, we've got a few. All right, those that had 7 or under are already gone, so we're going to take a moment. And no, we talked about how fast time moves, and we decided to do an illustrated message this morning about how fast time moves. So last week was April, today is December. Can you tell? That's how fast time. Okay, so time is so important to us that we ascribe to it power. So, for instance, we say things like this. We say, time will tell. We say like this. We say something like this. Time heals all wounds. Okay. Let me just stop and say here, I'm not sure that time actually has those capabilities, but we value time so much that we begin to ascribe to it all these kind of powers and these abilities because time is the most valuable asset that we have, right? Everybody has the different levels of income. Everybody has different dreams. But the truth is that all of us have the same number of hours a day, 24 hours a day. We're all allotted that amount of time. Time is valuable. It is the most incredible asset that we have. And so we began to ask you this question last week. What would you do if you knew you only had 1 month to live? 30 days. What perspective would change? What attitude would be different? How would you talk to those that you love? How would you talk to those you don't love differently if you only had 30 days? Or if maybe you had less than that, because my number was 23. So hopefully, how many of you looked at your number this week? Some point? Okay, about 8 or 9 of you. Okay, I want you to put this where you can see it because I'm hoping it's going to prod you and cause you to consider the number of your days, because I read this to you last week. It's kind of the springboard of the whole series. David said to God, he said, teach me how to number my days, because if I learn to number my days, I will have a heart full of wisdom. So you've got to know and have this understanding that your days can end, right? And so you've got to have this wisdom. So Jesus talked about time quite a bit. In fact, as I begin to look back over the life and ministry of Jesus, what I understand is that we talk about some of the things that Jesus taught, and we fail to realize that what Jesus was really teaching on was time. For instance, the 10 wise and the 10 foolish virgins, you know what that was? That's a lesson about time, using time properly. We talk about the lesson that he taught about talents, and we want to talk about, he's teaching us how to use what all the talents he's given us. But really, that's a lesson about time. He tells the same story almost identically, but just a little bit different about the mina, which was using the funds or the resources of the kingdom. But it's still a lesson about time. Jesus understood time. In fact, by the age of 12, he came into the temple and he said, when his parents come looking for him, he said, I am about my Father's business. So he teaches us, even at 12, that you don't have to wait until you're 92 to figure out time. You can figure out the importance and the priority of time even at a young age. But there is an account that Jesus gives that may be one of the premier lessons on time that I think he gives. I want you to join me this morning in Luke chapter 16. Because in Luke chapter 16, he teaches a lesson about time. When we read this account, we don't always think about time, but he's really talking about time. Luke chapter 16, beginning in verse 19. There once was a rich man, expensively dressed in the latest fashions, wasting his days in conspicuous consumption. A poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, had been dumped on his doorsteps. All he lived for was to get a meal from scraps off the rich man's table. His best friends were the dogs who came and licked his sores. Then he died. This poor man and was then taken up by the angels to the lap of Abraham. And the rich man also died and was buried in hell and in torment. And he looked up and saw Abraham in the distance and Lazarus in his lap. And he called out, Father Abraham, mercy, have mercy. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool my tongue. I'm in agony in this fire. But Abraham said, Child, remember that in your lifetime you got the good things, and Lazarus the bad things. It's not like that here. Here he's consoled, and you're tormented. Besides, in all these matters, there is a huge chasm set between us so that no one can go from us to you, even if he wanted to, nor can anyone cross over from you to us. And the rich man said, Then let me ask you, Father, send him to the house of my father, where I have 5 brothers, so he can tell them the score and warn them so they won't end up here in this place of torment. It's a lesson about time. Three things that I want to talk to you about this morning, just briefly, that we need to learn. If we're going to address the time and the number of our days, and we're going to come to some understanding that we've got to make the most of time, then we cannot waste our time. For your enjoyment, I almost played Wasted Days and Wasted Nights, and then I listened to the lyrics and decided I better not. But every time I say wasted days, I want to go into that deep baritone, wasted days. And never mind, y'all didn't play for that. So all right. So 3 lessons, because we don't want to waste our time. First thing that we need to understand is that, and this may seem odd in this discussion, because when you're discussing time, why would you stop for just a moment and consider material goods? Why, when you're talking about the necessity of prioritizing our time, would we stop and talk about material goods? But I think that we need to understand that most of us are giving our life away moment by moment, minute by minute, day by day, week by week, month by month, decade after decade, trying to obtain material things. And so we've got to stop when we start talking about not wasting our time, because we need to understand this lesson right here, and that is this: rich is relative. Rich is relative. This account illustrates this message for us, because although this man was the rich man in this account, this story, the rich man was rich, money rich. He had material wealth. He was money rich. He was time poor. I bring that to your attention because if you give away all your time and all you have to show for it are toys and houses and cars and clothes and stuff, you can be rich, but you can at the same time be very, very poor. I need you to understand, because some of us don't seem to comprehend this. We think that the way that we obtain stuff is with the currency that has the president's picture on it. Or worse, that comes out of our billfold in the form of a plastic card. We think that's how we obtain stuff. But that's not true. The currency to get stuff is time. You gain stuff by spending the currency of your days. That's how we obtain stuff. So I don't think Jesus was against stuff. I think what Jesus is trying to tell us is that there's a different way to evaluate and estimate success and what's important. The rich man was very rich, but he was also incredibly poor because he had all this stuff, but he had no seconds. Right? He runs out of time. The powerful thing about the account in Luke chapter 16 is that it's a perspective that we don't normally get, because the perspective comes looking backwards. This man dies, and he gets to look back over his life. And normally we don't get the rest of the story. We don't know what happens in that moment. But in this account, we get a glimpse of his perspective backwards. And what we see in his perspective is that he recognizes that he used all of his time, all of his energy, all of his moments, every second of his life pursuing material things. And then he comes to this evaluation: I wasted my days. I wasted my days. It's a unique perspective. He's saying, listen, I accumulated all this property, but in the exchange, I lost all my priorities. And so I've wasted my time. So now we see that he comes to his senses, and he wants to warn those that he loved not to make the same mistake he did. Which begs the question: what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul? That's about our spiritual condition, but that's also about how we use our time. Because if you waste all of your time trying to get all this stuff to keep up with the Joneses and to impress the Smiths who you don't know and who you don't even like, you can be very rich, but you can be very poor because of the pursuit. See, the rich man would scream to us, don't waste your time. Get the stuff, but don't focus on the stuff. Don't waste your life trying to get all this stuff that doesn't really matter in the end. Prioritize correctly. That's what he's trying to tell us this morning. But I want you to notice something. If you don't understand time, you will make the mistake that this man made, which is this: he lived selfishly. I want you to notice that in life he lived selfishly. He paid no attention to Lazarus. And so here he is eating opulent meals and the best of the best. And there's a poor man on his step, and he has nothing to do with him. He lived selfishly, but he was so messed up in his thinking that he even lived selfishly in death. Think about what happens. When we encounter this rich man in death, what does he say first? Deal with my need. I'm in torment here. Send Lazarus. Bring me a drop of water. And then when he's refused that request, then he thinks about, and I've got 5 brothers, and I don't want them to have happen to them what's happened to me. If you don't understand time, we have a tendency, all of us, me included, we live incredibly selfishly. We make life about us. So we have to understand time, because if not, then you are going to waste your life. The problem with this truth is this, is that most of us, listen, I'm going to backtrack. Not most of us, me. All right? Let me talk about me, because I'm not talking about you, although I'm talking about you. All right? I'm talking about us. Most of us, if we're not careful, this account bothers us, but we ignore it because we're so far down the track in the pursuit of stuff that now we are encumbered and weighed down by mortgages and payments and credit card bills, and the rat race has taken effect, and we're so far down this track that we see no way out, and we see no way to get off this train. And so when we read an account like this, we blow it off, because if we begin to consider it, what it does is it depresses us. And we go, well, I'm just not going to be able to make any changes. That's what typically happens. But there's another thing that can happen when you read this kind of account, if we'll pay attention. And that is that we can learn the next lesson in this account, which is this, is that you still have life time. Well, I'm too far down the track, but you still have life time. Abraham responds to this rich man's request. And this rich man says, do this and do that. And Abraham's response is this. I read it to you. He says, remember that in your lifetime, you got the good things and Lazarus the bad things. Remember in your lifetime. In other words, Abraham is literally saying, you had a life full of time. You could have made the adjustments in the scope of your lifetime, but you used up your entire lifetime. So now there's no time. It's not just a play on words. He's saying there's a period of time to make the necessary changes, and you failed to capitalize on the time in your life. And so now, because you wasted your lifetime, you don't get the request that you were requesting because you're out of time. I think it's interesting that Abraham doesn't put any limits on this. He doesn't. In other words, he doesn't break this man's down into segments because this is how we operate. Abraham didn't say, well, you had until you were 40 years old, and then when you turn 40, you cross over this imaginary invisible line, and once you cross 40, you can't make the necessary changes anymore because you've gone too far. Abraham didn't say, hey, you could have probably made some changes until you were about 60, but once you hit 60, it's too late because you can't teach old dog new tricks, and so now, okay, you're out of time. He views this man's life in its entirety, and he says, you had a lifetime. I bring that to your attention this morning because I think we set these invisible lines, and we think that if we pass these lines, we cannot make any course corrections. We're too far down the track. But the truth of this story is simply wrapped up in this, and that is this. It's never too late until it's too late. You have a lifetime. Regardless of how far down the track you may be 20, wishing you could make course corrections. You may be 40, hoping that one day, someday, but you give up because you think you're too far. Now there's too much going on. There's too much happening. There's too much history. You may be 60. You may be ending the near. Maybe your numbers coming due. But if you still have lifetime, you can make an adjustment. One man said it like this. He said, it's not that we have a short space of time, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and it has been given in sufficient, generous measure to all the accomplishment of the very greatest things if the whole of it is well invested. It's not that we don't have enough time. We have a lifetime. In fact, one man said it like this correctly. He said, the opportunity of a lifetime is only good during the lifetime of the opportunity. So we have to grasp in the scope of our lifetime, regardless of how old you may be, because this is not an age issue. This is a time issue. That is not, the question is not how old are you. The question is how are you going to use the time you have left? That is the real question. So Jesus is trying to walk us through by telling this story that there's some steps we need to take. And the first thing he's trying to do is get us to reflect, because he recognizes if we don't reflect, then we will regret. He wants us to view our life and make sure that our life is not full of wasted days, wasted nights, so that when we get to the end of it and we look backwards, there is regret there. He knew that if we don't stop and determine what matters, we will not only waste our lives, but like the rich man, we will ultimately look back and we'll have no time. And all that will be left is unbelievable regret. So then Paul weighs in. He recognizes the accounts and the teachings of Jesus on time, and he weighs in and he begins to talk to the Ephesians in chapter 5, and he makes a statement to them that is very similar to what Jesus is teaching. In Ephesians chapter 5, he encourages us to redeem the time. Right? Okay, then he walks us through the same process. He doesn't tell this story, but it's the same process. He says, look around you, reflect. His evaluation of the time is that the days are evil. And he says, so since you're reflecting about what's going on around you and in your life, recognize the days are evil. Then he says, redeem the time. Whew. It goes right over us. Because we understand the concept of redemption when it comes to souls. If I said to you that God can redeem our soul, everybody goes, woohoo! So excited about that. I understand that. I was lost, but now I'm found. I was headed to hell, but now I'm headed to heaven. He redeemed my soul. We understand about redeeming our lives. Right? My life was headed down a horrible path. I encountered Jesus. Now my life turned around, and He's redeemed my life, and I have a hope, and I have a destiny. I've got a plan. We understand redeeming relationships. My relationship was broken, and now God steps in and He redeems that. But we have no concept of God redeeming time. So what does that mean? What does it mean that time can be redeemed? What implications does that have for me? If I'm 45 years into this thing, I'm 65 years into this thing, and now I'm reflecting and trying to prioritize life. But what does it mean? God, how do you redeem time? Does it mean I get to do it all over again? Does it mean I'm like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day? And I'm going to get to relive the same day over and over and over and over and over again? That must be what it means to redeem time. It means I get to just wipe the slate clean and just start back from the very beginning and make it. No. It means that we wake up and we make the most of the time that we have left. Suddenly we come to this understanding, there's this redemption of time in our minds, so that all the other days that just passed by without us stopping and thinking about them, all the days we were racing and rushing and dashing towards the end, all of a sudden we come to a screeching halt and we reflect that the days are passing. And so now, Father, I need you to redeem time. And suddenly it doesn't matter if it's at 12, doesn't matter if it's at 22, doesn't matter if it's 82. We wake up and we go, God, I need you to redeem the time, and we come to our senses and we make the most of the time that we have left. It's all about gaining perspective and we quit spending time on trivial pursuits. We suddenly begin to think about I just have to have a question. Why does it take reaching halftime to understand that the game will end? Why do we have to wait until we're 65 and then wake up and go, well, now I've got like 10 or 15 years left and I'm going to give it my everything? Why don't we learn this lesson like at 22 or 20 or 15 or 14 and go, time passes quickly and I'm going to make the most of it? Paul wants us to know this, that time cannot be saved, but it can be redeemed. So regardless of what your chronological time is, we've got a wide variety and diversity in age groups in this room, but it doesn't really matter if you're closer to the start or closer to the finish. Does not really matter. What matters is that you redeem the time that you have left. You make the most of it. Paul wants us to understand that we can live our life on point and we can live our life on purpose. But to do that, you have to reflect so that it can be redeemed. Jesus figured it out when he was 12, and I'm so glad for him. But age isn't the issue. Because if that's the mark, then most of us are past it. All right, if you're under 12, I'm not talking to you. You can get it by 12. But most of us have passed 12. Right? Because some of y'all are already on Geritol, and AARP is like knocking your door down. All right? Do y'all even open those letters? I just throw them away now. I don't even pay attention. I just trash straight in the trash, right? I'm not there yet. You got me mixed up with somebody else. All right? So age doesn't matter. It's about time. In fact, Jesus did this too. Jesus talks about workers that show up late. They get in the game late. He was talking about harvesters, but listen, he's talking about time. They show up late. They didn't figure it out when they were 12. Doesn't it just bother you when somebody's like 12 and they know everything about life? And like they've already got their life planned out and marked out. You just want to just like, pow. You just like, kind of aggravate. But Jesus even talks to those of us that it took longer. He says these guys, they show up late. They don't start working on what matters until late. They've got bills and life concerns and 6.5 kids and 14 dogs and no cats because it's a biblical story. And their life is consumed. Their life is consumed with all this stuff. They show up late. But then Jesus says they get the same reward. What's he saying to us? He's saying it doesn't matter how old you are or when you come to your senses. What matters is you come to your senses and you begin to labor for what matters. You redeem the time. So in a nutshell, if we're going to learn the lesson this rich man wanted us to learn, it is this, is that we must learn what matters, or we'll waste our days. The fact is, listen to this, the fact is a wasted life is nothing more than an accumulation of wasted days. We waste one day, and then another day, and another day, and another day, and another day, and then when we wake up, it's too late. How much time do you have left? I got 23 last week, so minus 7. Esther's only got 3 days left. Danny's planning parties. That's what he told me. I don't know if that's true, but no, I'm playing. But will your life be filled with regret? Or will you redeem the time? Charles Francis Adams. The last name ought to ring a bell. Charles Francis. Anytime they use the middle name, you know they had to be important in history because you don't use them. Okay. Charles Francis Adams was the son of President John Quincy Adams. He was the grandson of President John Adams. Charles kept a diary. And if you go look through his diary, one day in his diary, he makes an entry and he writes this. He says, I went fishing with my son today. A day wasted. But then his son, Brooke Adams, also kept a diary. That diary still exists to this day. You can go read that diary, and this is what he wrote. Went fishing with my father. It was the most wonderful day of my life. The only thing that was different was the perspective about what mattered. And some of you are fishing every day and you think you're wasting your time, while others are going fishing with you and they think it's the most important, wonderful day of their entire life. It comes down to whether or not you will allow the Holy Spirit to work in your life to cause you to redeem the time. Make the most of your time, because it's either wasted days and wasted nights, or you redeem the time and you pursue what matters. So my question is, if this is your number, what are you giving your life to? What are you spending your life on? You're growing a business, but does it really matter? You're getting stuff, but does it really matter? Relationships are falling to the wayside so that you can get ahead, but does it really matter? Or will you end up rich but poor? The answer to that question solely rests on the answer of what you will do with the lifetime you have left. Father, this morning I pray that you would confront us with our need to redeem the time. Father, under the sound of my voice, there are different groups of people. There are some under the sound of my voice that are still very close to the beginning of time for them. Just young whippersnappers. They just coming up right now. They're so close to when they started. There are others of us that are much further down the path. There are many of us that are approaching that midpoint. And then there are others that are closer to the end than they were to the beginning. Help us to number our days so that we will have a heart full of wisdom. God, I'm asking you this morning that you would confront each of us with a necessary lesson. We don't want to waste our days. God, I'm praying over each person in this congregation, regardless of how far down the track they are, regardless of how consumed they are by bills and concerns and the cares of life, regardless of all that, I pray in this very moment, right now, you would wake us up and we would begin to reflect about what really matters. What really matters in life? If my lifetime ended right now, if this was the moment that you have appointed for me to end my days, this was the day I'm exiting this path called life, if this was it, Father, help me to understand what matters most. And as we take a moment just to reflect on that, I'm praying, Holy Spirit, that you would do what I cannot do. I can't point those things out because it's different for each one of us. There are some basic principles in place, but there are some very specific things that matter. There's a song inside of somebody that's not inside of somebody else, but that song matters. There's a book in somebody that's not in somebody else, and that book really matters. There's a dream inside of somebody that's not inside of somebody else, and that dream really matters. Father, help us to reflect on what matters, what really matters. And Father, as we reflect on those things, now I pray that you would wake us up so that we can redeem the time. We'll do like what the Message interpretation said. We'll make the most of the opportunity. We'll write. We'll sing. We'll compose. We'll take the chance. We'll mend the relationship. We'll make the investment. We'll do everything. We'll make all the changes necessary to redeem the time, to redeem the time, to redeem the time, to become focused on what's priority, to give our life, the rest of my lifetime. God, I sense that there's somebody here this morning that thinks that it's too late. Too many calendar pages have turned. Their age disqualifies them. But this morning, I pray that you speak deep within their spirit, regardless if they're 12 or whether they're 92. Doesn't really matter. Age does not matter. That is not what matters. What matters is the amount of time and how we use it. So, Father, I pray that you speak to those that have lost hope. You would remind us this morning that life is sufficient in length. So we must invest it. I pray that you would do that. Remove any hopelessness in regards to making a difference. I pray that we would step up and we would live on point and we would take care of priorities so that when the last day comes, our reflection will be that we made the most of every moment that we had. Help us not to waste our lives. I pray in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Would you do this? Look at your neighbor and go, no more wasted days and no more wasted nights.
It's been a privilege to have you join us for this time of ministry. To find more Passion Church resources or to make a donation online, visit www.passionchurch.tv. Remember, you can't live without passion. Welcome to Passion Church. For more information about Passion Church, please visit us online at www.passionchurch.tv. Now let's join the service already in progress.
He's about to be beheaded by the emperor of Rome by the name of Nero. And so he puts pen to paper in his last few days, and with the end in front of him so clearly, he writes to his spiritual son Timothy, and he tells Timothy what matters. What really matters in life. I want you to see what he says. With the end close at hand, this is what he says. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 through 7, he says, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come." The end is clearly in sight. It's right here. I know my days are limited, is what he's saying. He says, and the time of my departure has come. This is what he says. He says, "I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course, and I have kept the faith." What is that? Paul has just given us his top 3 things on his bucket list. With the end in mind, Paul is literally saying, these are the 3 things, knowing that I don't have much time left, these are the 3 things that matter to me most. I want us to examine them, because when we finish, what I want you to do is I want you to look at his top 3 and compare them to your top 3 and see if your top 3 line up. He says, first, as I'm about to die, the thing that matters to me, number 1, was the fight. Paul states that I have fought the good fight. I have battled through this. I'm not really sure that I can say I know for sure what Paul was thinking, but I think maybe that what Paul is doing is he's saying that when he reviewed his life, what matters most was that he gave his best every day. I fought this fight. It's interesting to me that he talks about his journey, his life as a fight. He doesn't say, I walked through life and it was easy. He doesn't say, I've gone through this and it was enjoyable all the time. He just says that when I review the last, this is it, the end is in mind. I see this, I have fought the good fight. He talked about life as a battle. I think the reason that so many of us, we fail to live up to Paul's standards is because we failed to view our journey like Paul did. Paul understood at the very end, looking back, that we live our life behind enemy lines. This is a fight. It is a fight to the finish. And he says, I didn't take any time off. He literally states, without saying it, you can read into it. He says, I fought the good fight. He's saying, I didn't let my guard down. I never let the guard down. I used every moment, every day to accomplish God's will in my life. I fought this fight. And I think it's a review of the fact that he was, here's the key word for Paul, I think, faithful. He was faithful. I stayed the course. I stayed alert. I stayed on guard. I stayed diligent. I stayed determined. I never quit. I never threw in the towel. I fought every moment of every day. I was a warrior all the way up to the end. I fought the fight. I think steadfastness was important to Paul. I think it was on his bucket list. He says, I fought the fight. I think you could exchange that word, those two words, the fight, and put steadfastness. I think he was determined that he was going to fight the fight to the end. He was going to remain faithful to his commitment. I think he could have said it like this: I kept my word. I kept my vow. I kept my promise. My word mattered. As you review your life, if you were up against the very end of your life and you knew that you only had a short time left, I wonder if you could say, I stayed in the fight. I wonder if maybe you could say like Paul, I've been faithful to what was really important. Or have you warred for things that don't really matter? Have you let your guard down? Have you loafed? Have you become distracted? I find it interesting that Paul says it like this. I went back and rewrote what he said for myself when he says, I fought the fight. I capitalized the three letters of the T-H-E, and put them in big letters because he says, I fought the fight. He didn't say I fought a fight. He said I fought the fight. The one that matters. How many of us die on mountains that don't really matter? How many of us fight for stuff that doesn't really matter? How many of us are warring our life away one day at a time? We're giving our life away. We're fighting for opinions. We're fighting for material things. We're fighting for stuff that really doesn't matter. Paul says, I fought the fight, the one that mattered, the one that was worth giving my life for. What are you giving your life for? What are you fighting for? Does it really matter? Is it worth your life? Is it the fight? Or is it just a fight? Paul says, I looked at the end of my life, and as I review it, and I create my bucket list, number one on my list is I fought the fight. The second thing he says is this. He says, I'm concerned about the finish. Not only was I worried about the fight, but Timothy, the other thing that was important to me was the finish. Paul then states that he's achieved another item on his bucket list, that he finished his race. He says it like this: I ran my course. One version says like this: I ran the course that was set before me. Right? You memorized it like that as a kid, probably like I did. It's a similar concept, but it's this idea of completion. Paul was basically saying this: I finished what I started. I finished what I started. It was important to Paul that he was a finisher. He didn't want to be known as someone who started something and didn't complete something. There's an Old Testament passage that has always intrigued me. It's found in 1 Kings. I'll let you look it up for yourself. But in 1 Kings, there's one of the kings of Israel, a young buck, comes up to him, a young warrior who's being braggadocious because he's about to go to battle. And he puts his armor on and he struts in front of the king and he's talking about, I'm going to go to war and I'm going to go to battle. And the king responds to this young buck like this. He said, the man who puts on the armor should not boast like the one who can take it off. And I read that and I was like, what is he talking about? And then I figured it out. He's saying that it's not a lot of people start the fight, but very few people finish the fight. And the one that should boast is not the one that starts something. The one that should boast is the one that follows all the way through and finishes stuff. And Paul says, as he evaluates his life, I finished. I completed. I broke the tape. I may not have been the fastest. I may not have been the first. But I finished what I started and I completed my course. This morning I want to challenge you as you examine your life. I want to ask you a question. Are you a starter or are you a finisher? Too many of us start a whole lot of stuff, but we don't complete stuff. We don't follow through. For instance, do you ever make promises that you don't fulfill? Do you ever start working on a relationship, but you never finished? Hello. You never finish the relationship. You don't work through the stuff that you need to work through to finish and bring to completion. You make all these goals at the first of the year, but one weekend you've already broken all your promises. Are you a finisher? Paul shows us that when the clock is ticking down, it will matter to us that we can look back over our life and conclude that we've completed some things, that I don't leave things undone, that I don't leave strings untied. It's important to complete what you've begun. Some of you started some stuff long ago and you've laid it down and you haven't completed. A book, an education, a friendship. What is it in your life that you have not completed? Paul would say it's important when you get to the end that you can look back and say, I finished what I started. Not only that, he says this. He says, I finished my course. That's an important phrase there. I finished my race. It was his course. It was not somebody else's course. I think that's important because I think what Paul is trying to teach us is that when you get right down to it at the end of life, comparison doesn't do you any good. You cannot run somebody else's course. Are y'all with me this morning? Paul is saying, look, there's a course. Another passage of Scripture says the steps of a righteous man or woman are ordered by God. That means God has given you this course that you're supposed to run. But what I've discovered, if we're not careful, that in life, most of us, we're trying or wishing that we had somebody else's course. I wish my marriage was like their marriage. I wish my job was like their job. I wish my car was like their car. I wish my clothes were like their clothes. I wish my house was like their house. And we're always trying to compare. And in so doing, we're trying to run somebody else's course. And therefore, we never complete our course. Paul said, when I reviewed my life, I look back and I recognize I completed my course. Touch your neighbor and say, stay on your course. Stay on your course. Stay on your course. There are too many of us wasting our time trying to run somebody else's course. And I cannot waste my time wanting or wishing for what somebody else has and not completing what I have. There's an assignment that God has for you. Do you know that if you run somebody else's course and you break the tape and you finish first, you're disqualified? Did you know? Oh, some of y'all didn't know that. In track, you have a lane that you are assigned to. In short track, and in particular, you have a lane, because we're talking 30 days or less, you have a lane you are assigned to. In the 100-yard dash, if you cross over into somebody else's lane, you are immediately disqualified. Immediately. And yet, how many of us are running our race and all of a sudden we see something we like in somebody else's life or we wish was in our life and we wander over into their lane, not recognizing that even if we finish the race right then and cross the tape, we're disqualified because we didn't finish our course. The challenges you're facing right now are part of your course. The triumphs you're enjoying right now are part of your course. You got to finish your race. Then Paul finishes his list. He says this. He says, as I examine the end of my life, I recognize that the fight was important and the finish was important. But then he comes along and he says, listen, I kept the faith. I kept the faith. When it came down to the last moments of his life, he believed that his faith was important. He held on to his faith. You go, well, man, if Paul was going through what I'm going through, he would recognize that his faith is not that important. My faith is not that important to me because all the stuff I've been going through, the pain I've been going through, the sickness I've been going through, the hurt that I've been going through, faith is just not on my list. It's just not that important. Listen, we forget who authored this thing. Paul didn't hold on to his faith without his faith being challenged. Do you remember his list? He made another list one time. He listed all the stuff he'd been through. Some of you are looking at me funny. Let me remind you of his list. He says, I was given 39 stripes by the Jews on 5 different occasions. We have no concept This is like strap me to a wall, rip my shirt off, and beat me with a whip 39 times. The history tells us that the Romans had perfected the art of whipping. Now, he says he was whipped by the Jews, but how do you think they learned how to do it? They watched the Romans do it. The Romans had perfected the art that they could beat you so severely to within an inch of your life, just enough right before it killed you. And Paul says, I endured that 5 different times. Talk to me about him not facing challenges. He says, not only that, I was beaten with rods 3 different times. Y'all ever been to church camp where they do, like, they put people in the little tunnel and you have to run through it and they hit you with their pillows? So some of y'all didn't go to the church camp I went to. We got really creative. We put tennis shoes in the end of our pillows and it was crazy. But that pales in comparison to, they beat him 3 times with rods. Okay, let's keep going because this shows you how much his faith mattered to him. He was stoned. Different kind of stone than some of y'all. Let's get this right. This is like, let's go out in the parking lot, let me find big rocks and throw them at you. They left him for dead. One of the most brutal ways, to die. People throwing rocks at you until it kills you. Your bones are broken. Skull shattered. Paul endured it. He goes on and he says, I was shipwrecked. He was out in the sea, floating. He was bitten by a snake. That's enough for me. I'm out. No. He says, I faced prolonged hunger and thirst. And yet through it all, he says this, I kept faith. He concludes that the challenges to his faith only deepened his faith. And so this morning, what I want to ask you, is your faith really that important to you? Because in light of what Paul went through and his ability to keep the faith, my question for you then is, why is your faith so easily shaken? If your faith really matters, when you review what you've endured in your life, can you say the same thing that Paul said? When your time comes to a close, will you be able to say, hey, I kept the faith. I was able to keep the faith. I held on. Did the challenge you faced cause you to want to curl up and quit? Or will you be able to say that I went through all the painful stuff that I went through, as brutal as it was at the moment, all this pain that I've gone through, at the end of it, even with it hurting and I didn't enjoy it and I didn't like it, but at the same time, I would not give up Jesus. I kept my faith. I didn't give up on trusting God. I didn't take matters into my own hands. I relied on Him. I wonder how many of us quit on our faith at the first sign of trouble. Paul, stoned, beaten, stripes, snakes, shipwreck, flat tire. Flat tire, I'm out. Jesus, why'd you let this happen to me? I give up on you. I thought you loved me, but now I got a flat tire. Paul goes, I was beaten. I was shipwrecked. I was stoned. And even after all that, I was still holding on to my faith in Jesus. How many of us go through simple little distractions or maybe a season of pain or a season of heartache or a season of trouble, and yet we still come to this place where we just want to throw in the towel and give up? Paul says, listen, my faith was more important to me than that. So now this is what I want you to do. Take your bulletin or your little list that you made. Pull it back out. I want you to look at it again. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to think about what Paul said was important. He said the fight was important, the finish was important, and the faith was important. Now what I want you to do is look at your list and see if it matches. Does what you wrote down really matter in comparison to what Paul said were his top 3 priorities? Because I didn't see all your lists. I saw Tari's number 1 and his lined up. I didn't see 2 or 3. So I don't know. He may have missed it after that. Lumped. All right? I don't know. But I would imagine that some of you wrote some stuff down like this. I want to go on a long vacation. Maybe you never had a vacation. So your top 3 bucket list is I want to go to Mount Everest. I want to see Mount Everest. Or maybe you wrote, I want to buy, my number 2 is I want to buy a huge house. Because you've always lived in an apartment. Or maybe number 3 is I want to be rich. And my question to you is this, simply this. Do any of those 3 really line up? Maybe we need to adjust our bucket lists. Maybe we need to reevaluate our life and understand that those things don't matter so much. When you look at a man who was about to die and he's reflecting over his life, he says, when it all comes down to it, that stuff really doesn't matter. Really doesn't. All this stuff we fret over, all this stuff that we're anxious about, all this stuff that we worry about, really doesn't matter. What really matters is whether I stayed in the fight, whether I finished what I'd started, and I kept my faith. Those are the things that matter. Maybe your list needs to be adjusted. Maybe your list isn't really life-worthy. Because we've already talked about this. We are literally giving our life away minute by minute by minute. And so it's important for us to think about the things on our list and determine whether they really matter or not. If we live with the end in mind, do the things that we're giving our life away to really matter? What is it that you want and need to accomplish so that on your last day, we'll be able to say, I fought, finished, kept the faith. What is it that you need to accomplish to do those things? What matters? Here's another question that really needs to be asked. Who matters? And then here's another question. Why should we even consider this? I would suggest to you this morning that we have to wrestle with 2 items to be able to live life on purpose. We have to wrestle with these 2 items, and then I'll get out of your way. The first one I've mentioned over and over again. We have to wrestle through what matters. Don't we? Is it just me that I get sidetracked by stuff that doesn't matter? Anybody? Surely I'm not the only one that I give days away to stuff that doesn't matter. I got teenagers in my house that give hours, days away to video games. And I gripe at them about it, but I did the same thing. I can still remember on a specific day in Purcell, Oklahoma, I was with my grandmother. She was getting her hair fixed. It took several hours to do that. She gave me a bunch of quarters. I spent $18 on a video game in one day. I gave a whole day. I can give you the stats of how many days we give away to watching TV, how many days we give away to talking on the phone, how many days we give away eating, how many days we give away sleeping. And my question is we've got to wrestle. My challenge to you is this: we have to wrestle with what matters. But there's a second part of that too. We have to wrestle with the when. Because it's not just about the what, it's the when. If you can figure out what matters, you also have to deal with when matters. Because some of you know what matters, but you keep waiting. And time is passing by. And days are being lost. And you keep thinking, one of these days. Well, what if your days end? So you must come to grips with this concept of this is what really matters in my life. So now I know what matters. I've got to address the when question. When am I going to spend my time on what matters? Because some of you wrote stuff down like this: spending my time with my family. So then the question is, when? Some of you wrote, I want to write a book. When? Some of you wrote, I want to repair a broken relationship. When? It's not just enough to know the what. You've got to come to grips with the when. Because if you don't come to grips with the when, at the end of your life, you're going to look back and go, well, that mattered, but I'm out of time. I got no time left. So this morning, what I want us to do as we evaluate our bucket lists, it is crucial for you to designate those 3 top items. This is what I want to give my life to. But this is what I want you to finish. This is your assignment right here. On your little list, in big letters above it, I want you to write when. Question mark. Well, write that down. When? When am I going to do this? Because here's the issue. We can walk out of here this Sunday morning with a great list of what. But the only thing that will motivate us to deal with the what is to confront the when. Why is 6 years from now better than now? Why is one day out there better than now? What steps can I take? See, this is how this works. When you can identify the what, you got to address the when. And when you address the when, it forces you to address the how. How am I going to do this? Because you're not just going to roll up one day and it happened. It takes baby steps. This is a process. It's baby steps. Paul didn't just finish his course on his last day. It was one day at a time. He worked it out step by step. And for you to write the book, you're going to have to take one day at a time and write. You're going to have to take one day at a time and write. You're going to have to take one day at a time and write. For you to repair the relationship, you're not just going to fix it overnight. It didn't get broken overnight. You're not just going to fix it overnight. You got to take a step here and a step there and a step here and a step here and a step here. And then one day, the what will be dealt with. So what I'm asking you to deal with this week, this is your homework, is to review your what over and over and over again with this thought in mind. When? When am I going to do this? And out of that, I want you to ask this very important question. How? How am I going to make this happen? Because if you don't deal with the when and the how,
Welcome to Passion Church. For more information about Passion Church, please visit us online at www.passionchurch.tv. Now let's join the service already in progress.
Well, those of you that are still here must have gotten a higher number than some others. All right, so you've survived, so we're glad you're still here. Well, every father that I've ever met wants their child's first words to be Dad. I haven't met a father yet that was okay if the child said Mom first. All right, I don't know what that's about, but every dad wants the first word to be Dada, and every mom wants the first words to be Mama, right? So, but here's the truth of the matter. Soon after they say, whether they're the best children in the world and they say Dad first, or they're second best and they say Mom first, doesn't really matter. At some point in the equation, it doesn't take very long that there's another word that they learn very soon after that first word. And that word is this: mine. Mine. Right? Every toy wanted by a sibling or a playmate calls for this escalating scream of mine, mine. Glass breaking, mirrors breaking, eardrums breaking, screaming, it's mine. It's mine. Doesn't matter that they're surrounded by toys that have never been touched, that have never been played with, that are still brand new in their wrappings. It doesn't really matter. It's mine. It's mine. We want ours. This declaration of territory and ownership. It doesn't take us very long to reveal the selfish tendencies that we have. It also does not take very long in our society that as we learn to say mine so quick, for that me, myself, and I mentality to be driven deep down inside of us. And what it does is it produces a society that is self-absorbed, self-centered, and self-consumed. It's this mantra of do you. I gotta do me, and you gotta do you. It's all about me. I'm gonna get mine. Met anybody like that yet? Surrounded by people like that yet? I've met a bunch of people like that. It's all about what I want, when I want it, and it's about you making sure that I get mine. It has led to a new generation, the selfie generation. We don't even take pictures of anybody but us. It's ridiculous. You go to our stream on our albums on Facebook and on Instagram, and it's picture after picture, the goofy ones where they're up like this and they're making the silly mouths and all these stupid looks, but it's all about us. We want it about us. We want it about us. Well, we think our own happiness is all that's really at stake and all that matters. And so when somebody comes along and they say what I'm getting ready to say to you, we shake our heads and we go, we can't really agree with that. It's an author. This author by the name of Albert Camus wrote this many years ago. He wrote this. He said, to be happy, we must not be too concerned with others. And we go, oh, see, you did it. You went, that's not right. But then, even though we disagree with the statement when it's right out in front of us, I've noticed that we tend to live our lives as if that's true. And we become self-consumed. But what if you only had 30 days left to live? What if the clock was ticking down, time is almost over, the last few days of your life you realize now there's clarity, because I told you last week that the diminishing time in our life produces clarity. The older you get, I know that the young folks in the room are invincible and nothing's ever going to happen to them. But for those of us where the clock is ticking and we realize that we're closer to the end than the beginning, now there's clarity, and we should realize that those that come after us matter. But for whatever reason, most of us still don't get it. It's the proverbial sticker that you've seen driving down the road with the big RV, the one that's like 92 feet long, and you know gets like a half mile to the gallon, and every time they stop to fill up. Have you ever been in one of those things in the gas station? It's an eye-opening experience. It costs like $400 to fill it up. And on the back of the RV, there's the sticker that says, I'm spending my kids' inheritance. And although it's funny, it's a way of life. It truly reveals that we don't stop and think about those coming after us like we should. Scripture provides a contrast. There's a contrast. There's a portion of Scripture I'm going to read to you this morning that I have read to you on multiple occasions. But I want to contrast it with the way we're supposed to live. I want to show you how we're supposed to live. All right, I want to take you into Scripture and show you that when it gets really down to brass tacks about what really matters in life, this is how we're supposed to live. And then I want to show you a contrast to that and the results if we don't. Okay, so Psalm chapter 78, verses 1 through 7, David comes along and he reveals to us the way that we should live. Listen to this very closely. He says, listen, dear friends, to God's truth. Bend your ears to what I tell you. I'm chewing on the morsel of a proverb. I'll let you in on the sweet old truth. Stories we heard from our father's counsel, we learned at our mother's knees. Now, there's more, but let's stop right there for just one second and say, look where he learned wisdom. stories that we've heard from our fathers, counsel we learned at our mother's knee. We're not keeping this to ourselves. We're passing it along to the next generation. God's fame, His fortune, the marvelous things He has done. He planted a witness in Jacob, set His word firmly in Israel, then commanded our parents. This is what God said to the parents to teach it to their children, so that the next generation would know, and all the generations to come. What does He want them to know? He wants them to know the truth. Tell the story so that their children can trust in God. Never forget the works of God, but keep His commands to the letter. Heaven forbid that they should be like their parents, bullheaded and bad. A fickle and faithless bunch who never stayed true to God. Did you see the plan? This is how we're supposed to live. Generations teaching coming generations. Fathers teaching sons. Mothers teaching daughters. There's this passing on that as we testify and we declare the works of the Lord and His faithfulness, like we sang about this morning, as parents stand with their arms raised and declare that it is well with my soul and you're faithful, that the children see us do that. The young men see the old men do that. The young women see the old women do that. And in that we pass it on from generation to generation. King David is basically trying to implore us to look over our shoulders and take care of the generations that are coming along behind us. Now, some of you sitting in this room right now are literally in your own heart saying, well, I don't have any children. So let me fast forward real quick to the New Testament when Paul chimes in and he begins to give instructions to the New Testament church that even if you don't have physical, natural children, you have spiritual children in your life. Therefore, he declares in the New Testament church that the old men should gather the young men and teach them how to live and be an example to them and illustrate for them what a godly life looks like. He says to the older ladies, hey, older ladies, there are young ladies watching you, and you should gather them and teach them and counsel them and show them how to live. We teach from generation to generation, so nobody's off the hook. If you have no children, you're not off the hook. That is the standard that we are called to live up to. Here is the contrast. The contrast is in the Old Testament, there is another king who I'm afraid that due to the selfishness of his own heart, and now due to the selfishness of our society, his style of life has now has so permeated our lives that it now permeates the house of God, and we tend to live like this king rather than we do like David. And I want to just show you the contrast. It's a passage of Scripture that I've referenced to you on numerous occasions, read to you before, but I want to read it again. I could have found another passage, but this is the passage that speaks to me and how we seem to conduct our life now in 2018. And it's dangerous because here we see the result, but we don't wrestle through the concept revealed in this account. I want us to this morning. With time ticking down, we need to make a decision to live like David rather than like this king, or we're in trouble. One man said it like this. He said, Christianity is one generation, always one generation from extinction. Our ability to carry forward, to carry on, to continue is based on our willingness to live like David rather than to live like this other king. Let me read it to you. Isaiah chapter 38. Beginning in verse 1, we're going to read down through verse 6, and then we're going to see the results of what takes place in verse 39, verses 5 through 8. It says this: At that time, Hezekiah got sick, and he was about to die. And the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, visited him and said, God says, prepare your affairs because you've got 30 days to live. Okay, that's basically, prepare your affairs and your family. This is it. You're going to die. He got the low number out of the bag. You're not going to get well. This was Hezekiah's response. He turned away from Isaiah and facing the wall, he prayed to God, God, please, I beg you, remember how I've lived my life. I've lived faithfully in your presence. I've lived out of a heart that was totally yours. You've seen how I've lived, the good that I've done. And Hezekiah wept as he prayed, painful tears, because when the time starts ticking down, you get clarity. Then God told Isaiah, go and speak with Hezekiah and give him this message from me, God, the God of your ancestor David. I've heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Here's what I'll do. I'll add 15 years to your life, and I'll save both you and this city from the king of Assyria. I have my hand on this city. So now we fast forward just a little ways into chapter 39, and I'll give you the backdrop here in just a second. But after experiencing that and his life being spared, this is what happens. Isaiah 39. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, now listen to this message from God of the angel armies. I have to warn you that the time is coming when everything in this palace, along with everything your ancestors accumulated before you, will be hauled off to Babylon. God says that there will be nothing left. Nothing. And not only your things, check this out, but your sons. Contrast that with David has said. He says, not only your things, but your sons. Some of your sons will be taken into exile, ending up as eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Hezekiah replied to Isaiah, listen to what he said. Good. If God says so, it's good. Within himself, here it is. Here's the I'm spending my children's inheritance sticker in Hezekiah's life right now. I'm sure he had one on the back of his chariot. Because this is what he said. This is what it says. Within himself, he was thinking, but nothing bad will happen in my lifetime. I will enjoy peace and stability as long as I live. Do you see the contrast? Here's the backdrop. Hezekiah was about to die, and he begs God for mercy. Check this out. And God responds and says, you don't just have 30 days to live now. I'm going to intervene, and I'm going to extend your number so that you have 15 more years to live. Let me tell you, folks, that's a miracle. I am facing death. Within the next few days, I'm going to be destroyed. My life is going to be cut off. But now God steps in and says, hey, wait a minute. I'm going to stop my plan. I'm going to change my plans for you. And I'm now going to extend your life for 15 years. That is a miracle. And another way to say that is like this. In other words, Hezekiah experiences God's power firsthand. But now we fast forward, and his own pride gets in the way. And I won't go into all what he does, but he shows all of his riches to a visiting king. And so Isaiah is sent back to give another word. And this word is this: due to your sin, your children will be taken into captivity, and they will become not only slaves, but they will also become eunuchs. We don't hear that word much anymore, eunuchs. Most of us have no concept of what he's even saying there, but let me just say it like this. He is basically saying that they will be unable to be fruitful, and they will be unable to multiply. So in other words, the word is I'm going to cut this generation off right here. And in Hezekiah's own selfishness, and without this ability to look after those that are coming after him, only concerned about himself, he says, the word of the Lord is good. No, it's not. But he says, the word of the Lord is good because I will experience peace and stability in my day. That is selfishness on display. There's not even any thought to those coming after him. He hears his children will be held in bondage. They will be unable to reproduce or be fruitful. But he says, as long as everything's good for me, then it's a good word. Talk about a contrast. David says, look after those that are coming. Teach them. Remind them of God's faithfulness. Hezekiah says, as long as I've got peace and stability in my day, I'm happy. Doesn't that sound familiar with where we are today? How many of us have experienced the power of God firsthand? Firsthand. We have encountered the very power of God. I don't know what your story is all about, but I could probably go around the room and say, well, some of you experienced the healing power of God firsthand. Some of you have experienced the delivering power of God by firsthand experience. Some of you have seen God restore relationships and restore your dreams and bring all these plans about, and now your life is better than you ever thought it could be. Your life was messed up, and now all of a sudden life is good. You have experienced life, the life-changing, the life-extending, miracle-working power of God for yourselves. But how many of us are satisfied if even those that are coming after us don't have the same encounter? As long as my move is protected and perpetuated, then I'm happy. You don't think that happens? Why do you think there are so many churches in America right now that refuse to change? Why do you think that there's so many fights going on inside of church buildings, even as we are meeting here today, fighting over styles and preferences and versions of the Bible to read from the pulpit? People getting angry over the silly stuff that doesn't really matter, simply because they're more concerned about their experience and their encounter, and they don't really give a rip whether or not the generation to come ever experiences God for themselves. I just want to experience God for me. As long as I get my buttons pushed, as long as I get my goosebumps, as long as I get my song sung, as long as I get my version read, as long as you do my style, then I'm happy. Don't change the carpet, don't change the pews, don't change the paint, because I want to worship God until I die, but I don't really give a rip about the coming generation. And we experience God firsthand, but we don't think about the coming generation. Maybe we're more like Hezekiah than we are David. Out of this contrast, this glaring contrast of what David said we should do, and now Hezekiah comes and illustrates us the opposite, the antithesis of that. Now, let me just make a couple remarks to you to maybe challenge us as our clock starts to count down and there are people coming after us. Maybe I can challenge you a couple ways this morning. The first thing I want to say to you is this. I want to say, somebody is watching you. All right, do I have any 70s and 80s fans? Because I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, somebody's watching me, watching me, watching me. So, some of y'all don't even know. Come on, sing it, Tari. Come on, help me. I had a moment when I wrote that down. Yeah. See, he knows. See, the older folks know. Those of us that know what real music is about, we know. But there's truth in that. Somebody's watching us. There's a truth that I need to drive home to you, that regardless of which of these kings you follow, whether you follow the standard set by David or you follow the standard set by Hezekiah, can I tell you this morning that your days will end, but your influence will not. Your days are going to come to an end, but the influence that you spread during those days will never come to an end. One of the most vivid memories I have for us as a body, some of you didn't experience this, and I'm sorry, but about 8 years ago, maybe not that long, about 8 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I did something on a Sunday morning that I am never going to forget as long as I live. It was a dramatic moment. I preached a message. I don't even remember what I was preaching, but I did this illustration. I picked certain individuals in the body, and I had them stand up. And I asked this question, and when they stood up, I said, if so-and-so, I called a gentleman, and I made him stand up, and I called him by name. If so-and-so, over the next year of his life, if he backtracks and he gives up on God and he fails and he turns his back on God, how many of you will be devastated? How many of you will be impacted? How many of you that would hurt your heart and make it difficult for you? And I watched literally the entire congregation rise to their feet. And I did that over and over again. I'll never forget that, because what it illustrates for us is that we all have influence and that people are watching us. You cannot escape the fact. We want to live like our life, like we're on an island, and what I do doesn't really matter, and it doesn't really hurt anybody else, and it doesn't really impact anybody else, and it doesn't really influence anyone else. But the truth is, you're not on an island, so don't fight the follow. Paul comes to this place where he understood this to such a degree that in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, he makes a profound statement. He says this, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Do you recognize what he's saying? This is a profound principle. He is literally saying that if you will follow me, I will get you to Jesus. If you will walk in my steps, you will wake up one day and you will be in front of Jesus. Y'all, are you getting it? Follow me, and I will live my life in such a manner, with such integrity, with such character, with such purpose, that as I take my steps every day, I am literally leading you on a path to Jesus. And you thought you were following me, but when the end comes and my days are over, my influence has impacted you, and suddenly you're not a follower of Paul anymore, you're a follower of Jesus. So my question then is this: can you say that about those that are following you? Because somebody's watching you, watching you, watching you. You can't get away from it. They're watching you at Starbucks. They're watching you at the bank. They're watching you in the restaurant. They're watching you driving down the road. They're watching you when you walk into your house. They're watching you when you walk out of the house. They're watching what you do at work. They're watching what you talk about. Which leads me to the last challenge, and that is this: you will leave a trail. You can't help it. Each and every one of us are trailblazers. Our lives lead those after us somewhere. And remember, all of us are being watched. Doesn't matter whether you have natural children or not. Paul said his trail would lead to Christ. Where will your trail lead? If we're going to lead a life that lives up to David's standards, then we will lead the next generation according to what he instructs us. He says to lead the next generation, check this out. He says, lead the next generation to keep the commandments more faithfully than you did. That's what he says. He challenges the Israelites to teach the next generation to keep the commandments at a greater level than they did. So here's the truth that I want to share with you this morning is if you follow David's instructions, you will lead someone. You may not even know it. You know that's how this works, right? Some of you don't even know people are watching. You may not even know it. But as you're living your life with integrity and character and purpose, people are watching you that you don't even know are watching you. And all of a sudden, you lead them by your example and you blaze a trail, and they follow you into a deeper relationship with God if you follow David's example. But if you follow Hezekiah's example, then we don't leave behind a trail of bread. We leave a trail of bondage. Because David says, what I want you to do is I literally want you to leave a word trail that will lead the next generation to me. But Hezekiah says, no, I'm going to blaze a trail that will cause the next generation to wind up in bondage. Okay. How many of us... Hezekiah gets the word that his children will become slaves and they will become eunuchs. He trades their future for his fun. He accepts his peace even though the price is their pain. He embraces ease on the back of their enslavement. So how many of us live like that? We are purchasing our happiness, but in so doing, our children's future is at risk. We get what we want, but their destiny is not only delayed, their destiny is completely and totally derailed. But we got what we wanted. Hezekiah doesn't even blink at the fact that the prophecy said, your children will become eunuchs, unable to be fruitful. Let me bring that home and then I'll get out of your way. Because I want you to understand that we are blazing a trail and we have this ability to live our life in such a way that we cause the next generation to wind up being eunuchs. We need to understand that we can lead a trail that will cause those coming after us to become spiritual eunuchs. Let me explain. If we view our relationship with God and with the church as optional, we will lead them to being unfruitful spiritually. It's quiet up in here. If we view our relationship with God as no longer a priority and it's a duty rather than a delight, we will lead the next generation into becoming spiritual eunuchs. They will not be fruitful. If the generation after us doesn't see us worship, if they don't hear us pray, if they don't see us read, if what we say in here is not the same thing we say out there, if what we do on Sunday never shows up again until the next Sunday, then we are blazing a trail that will cause the next generation to be spiritually unfruitful. Our trail can lead them to becoming financial eunuchs. They can watch us they can watch how we spend, and they can watch how we don't save, and they can watch as we steal the tithe, and they can watch how we steward, and they can watch what we value, and they can watch as we make things idols that shouldn't be idols. And all of a sudden, when our days are numbered and our days are coming to an end, the next generation will care much more about cars and houses and clothes than they ever care about people or care about God. And they will be financial eunuchs in bondage. We can lead them to becoming emotional eunuchs. If we won't let our walls down, and if we hold people at a distance, and if we don't model accountability, and if we refuse access, and if we resist vulnerability, then those after us will become emotional eunuchs or relational eunuchs, and all of a sudden now they will battle. See if this sounds like some of the generation coming behind us now. Now they will be active on Facebook, and they have 4,000 friends, but they don't have any real life friends, and they become isolated, and they become lonely, and they begin to fight depression, and they begin to fight all these things that generations before them didn't fight, simply because we've led them down a path that leads them to being relational eunuchs, and they don't know how to get along. Those coming after us will either follow a trail to bondage, or we can lead a trail to bread. A trail of bread that will lead them to life. The only way I know to illustrate this is like this, is we live our life like this. We look at the generations coming after me and we say, hey, you want to know how to handle tragedy? Watch me. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. I've never seen the righteous forsaken, or the begging for bread, because I'm leaving a word trail for you to know how to live your life when things don't go the way. You want to know how I handle injustice? Let me leave you a little bread, because what I want to tell you is that I've never seen God take a bruised reed and break it. I've seen God respond to the orphans and to the widows, and he comes to those that are broken in their spirit and they're crushed, and he's close to them. That's how we deal with injustice. Want to know how to worship? Watch me lift my hands in the sanctuary. Watch me lift up my head where redemption's coming from the hills when I worship Him in spirit and truth. If you want to know how to worship, watch me. You want to know how to deal with your finances? Then this is what I'm going to show you by the bread trail. That you cast your bread on the waters and it comes back multiplied. And you deposit your goods into the treasury of heaven. Because where my treasure is, my heart will be there also. So I put my trust in Him. If you want to know how I deal with things when people hurt me, I turn the other cheek. I pray for those that despitefully use me. I don't strike back. I give them grace because great grace was on us all. All I'm doing is leaving a bread trail. I'm trying to show them how to deal emotionally, and I'm trying to show them how to deal in worship, and I'm trying to show them how to use their money, and I'm trying to show them how to use their goods, and I'm trying to show them how to deal with it so that when the end of the day comes and my life is over and I'm no longer here, my life is gone, but my influence is not gone. So my children will walk after me and say, I don't know what to do in this situation, but I watched Dad, and my dad showed me that when people speak bad about me, I don't defend myself. I look to God because He's a strong tower and the righteous can run into Him and be saved. Oh, and I don't know how to invest my money, and I want to buy certain stuff, but I watched my dad wait when he didn't really want to wait, and I watched my dad tithe when he didn't think he could afford to tithe, and so now I'm blessed and I'm fruitful because I'm watching the trail. And I wanted to know how to worship. Well, all I had to do was watch my mom every day of my life walk into a house after a long day of teaching when things aren't like I wanted them to be, and throwing up my hands and calling on the name of God and singing, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And so they know how to worship, and they know how to have relationship, and they know how to deal with their situations. And when tragedy comes, their head won't hang. They'll lift their head and they'll understand that God is right there for that. I am going to lead them with a trail of God's word into freedom, rather than saying, I don't give a rip about the generation coming after me, and I experienced God and I had a good time in church, but I don't really. No, sir, I'm leaving. One step at a time. I'm just leaving a bread trail, just leaving some breadcrumbs, so that one day they find out that the path leads all the way back to God, and they're there with me worshiping Him. Can I get anybody in the house that would say, I want to follow God and I want to leave a trail? I want to leave a trail. I want to leave a word trail to Him. This is what, everybody stand up. Everybody stand. What I want you to do this morning, some of you are going to have to move out of your comfort zone. Some of you don't have natural children in this house. I get it, but somebody's watching you. You have a responsibility that if you're going to live up to what David said, there are people around you in this congregation that don't feel like they have anybody to follow, so they're following you. They're following you. How did I get this microphone in the first place? I followed the bread trail. That's right. That's right. They're watching you. And so some of you feel like orphans and like you're all by yourself, but you're not. And so you're going to have to move out and find spiritual children. You say, well, I'm not older than them. Doesn't matter. Age has nothing to do with it. For those of you that have children in the room, I want you to get them quick. Get them. Pull them over. Grab them. I'm almost tempted to go empty kids' church out, but have you ever tried to herd cats? If you don't have natural children, I want you to look around, and I want you to adopt somebody real quick. Real quick. Adopt somebody. Nobody should be alone, because none of us are alone. Nobody's alone. Teresa Shepherd, get up there. Y'all go up there with Jess. Go up there. You got one coming. Y'all too. Go too. She followed the bread trail. Where's Aaron P? Aaron, did he walk? I'm looking for I got it. Phil. Come here, Phil. Get up there with Steve Coleman. Who else is? Barney, you got Miss Marge back there? Will you help? Oh, you got Nikki too. Nikki, you and Barney and Miss Marge? Nobody by themselves. Hey, this is a reality. Look, you want to know how I learned to deal with tragedy? Seriously, you want to know how I learned to deal with tragedy? I watched him. That's how I learned to deal with tragedy. I had a good idea from my own parents, but when it happens in your lifetime, the only way I can figure out how to do it is to watch him. That's how I learned. How did Esther Nix learn faithfulness? She watched the bread trail. Why are her children and Danny's children in ministry? Because they watched. Why are the Magbies all in church? Not today, but all in church. Not here anyway. I don't know where they are, but that's all right. I ain't busting their chops. They're here most of the time as one big family. Why? They watch the bread trail. Y'all don't know the whole story. I know I know Brett's dad's story. All he did was follow the bread trail, and now his kids, he and Miss Linda, are leading their kids. Do you understand what I'm saying? Our days are numbered. Our days will end. Our influence will continue. We have the choice. We either lead them to bondage or we lead them to bread that will sustain them. But not just for this next generation, but for generation after generation after generation. I want you to take the hands of the people that you're with this morning. Natural family, spiritual family. And I want you to make a covenant with one another that together you will lead your life in such a way that it will outlive the people in this room, all the people in this room. Because it's not enough that when my parents are gone, that I keep following. And it's not even enough that when my parents are gone and I'm gone, that my children keep following. Or Stephanie and Gary's children keep following. We want to live this thing so that generations to come that we don't even know about can point back and say it started way back then. Father, this morning I pray, I thank you for those in our lives that we followed to your word. I thank you, Father, that there were people in our paths that blazed a trail of faithfulness and fruitfulness and an encounter with you, and it changed their life. But Father, now I ask that we would not become satisfied with their encounter with you, that we too would experience your power firsthand. But then it would go beyond that. We wouldn't become selfish about that. We would begin to leave a trail that our children's children's children can follow to you. Father, I'm praying for every person in this room this morning, because every one of us have influence, and every one of us are leading people somewhere. People are watching us. They watch us when we do business. They watch us when we buy things. They watch us in our attitudes. They watch us. And we don't want to lead them to bondage just because we've been blessed. So this morning, Father, I pray that you would challenge us and we would begin to learn how to leave a bread trail, a trail of word that that our life would be based on your word so strongly that when we're dead and gone and our numbered days are over, that the following generations will have a path that leads to the cross, that leads to the throne, that leads to relationship with you. And they can point back and say, the trail I'm following, I didn't figure this thing out on my own. I followed somebody. I pray my children would have an encounter with you firsthand. I don't want them to sit around and talk about the good old days. And I don't want them to sit around and talk about my parents' experience and my parents did this. Father, I'm praying you'd give them a supernatural encounter with you to the degree that they will be able to tell their children, I followed my parents to this, but I had an encounter for myself. And now I'm telling you not only about what grandma and grandpa and great-grandma and great-grandpa encountered, I'm telling you about what I encountered. And I pray that the generations after us would follow more faithfully. They'd follow more blessed. They would follow more fruitful than we ever did. But I pray that they would get there by our example. I pray that you would do this in Jesus' name. Father, I pray for every person in this room that does not have a natural offspring in this place right now. I pray that they would recognize that their influence is just as important and just as widely cast as those with natural children. And we would live our lives with one another, so that you would teach us how to walk through tragedy. Teach us how to walk through blessing. Teach us how to walk through persecution. Teach us how to walk through being spitefully used. Teach us how to handle our finances. Teach us about what really matters. And then let us grow up to the place where we can say this: if you'll follow me, if you will follow me, I will lead you to Jesus. And while you're following me, it will be just like Jesus is right there in front of you and you're walking towards him by my lifestyle, by my example. I pray that you would do this so that when our days are over, our influence will remain. I ask you to do this in the name that is strong from generation to generation. I ask you to do this in the name of the one who gives life to generation to generation. I ask you to do this in the name of the one that provides mercy that endures from generation to generation. May we inspect our walk so that we recognize that we're being followed. In the mighty, powerful name of Jesus we pray. And everybody said, amen. Would you do this? Would you turn to the person you're praying with right now? And would you just say, hey, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. Come on, tell them, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm watching you.
It's been a privilege to have you join us for this time of ministry. To find more Passion Church resources or to make a donation online, visit www.passionchurch.tv. Remember, you can't live without passion.